You know, once in a while, I'll take a chance on a movie just on a whim, just pull it up on streaming, and maybe it'll be hot garbage, but maybe it might be good. And with this movie in particular, I figured it'll at least be entertaining, but this movie really surprised me, and I got a lot to say about it. The Count of Monte Cristo. Now, The Count of Monte Cristo came out in 2002 and is an adaptation of the Count of Monte Cristo book, which was written by Alexandre Dumas, and he was a very famous French novelist, and he's probably most famous for The Three Musketeers. So if you know anything about Three Musketeers, this is very much in that same vein of old French history. But this one takes place around the time of Napoleon's exile, so somewhere in the 1800s. But like I said in the intro, I just took a chance on this movie. I'd heard about it, and I saw that Jim Caviezel was attached to it, and Jim Caviezel is the lead. He is the titular Count of Monte Cristo. But at the start of this movie, he goes by the name of Edmond, and it's the story of Edmond and his best friend Fernand, who betrays him, gets him unjustly arrested because he's jealous that he's engaged to Mercedes, who's this beautiful woman, and he wants her for himself, so he backstabs his best friend because he's jealous of him, and it's a class issue. It's actually kind of complicated. But to sum up, Edmond gets arrested, he's in prison for 20 years, and then eventually he escapes, and now he's off to exact his revenge on not just Fernand, but this hit list of all the people that conspired against him, that were instrumental in his imprisonment. So this really is a revenge tale first and foremost, just with all of the trappings and backdrop of Revolution era France. And this movie had my attention instantly and kept my attention throughout the entire runtime because this is just a fantastic story. I've never read the book myself, and I haven't even seen any of the other versions that have been made about this story. I was blown away by how good this movie actually is, and a lot of that credit has to go to Jim Caviezel as the Count of Monte Cristo, because he's playing like 3 different characters over the course of this movie. He's basically Christian Bale in Batman Begins. He's one person at the beginning of the story, and in the middle he has to find himself, and then he's a completely different person by the end of the story. He's going off to exact his vendetta. He's almost like this vigilante superhero thing that predates all the superheroes that we know and love by, I don't know, 100 years or so. And Jim Caviezel just has this likability about him. He's charming, he's handsome, he's a really good leading man in a movie like this, and then you see him get arrested, and you see him being tortured and whipped, and you just feel so bad for him. But he has this intensity in his eyes that when he escapes the prison, he's a completely different man, much more wise, much more world-weary than the man that went into the prison. And a lot of that is told through his eyes. Just look at some of the stares and looks that he gives throughout this movie, and it just grips your attention. And part of me does wish that Passion of the Christ hadn't completely destroyed his career, but I feel like he doesn't feel the same way about it. He feels forever changed and put on a different path because of that movie. But selfishly, I can't help but think of what other great performances we could have gotten if it went a different way. But all the credit can't go to Jim Caviezel because Guy Pearce also does a fantastic job as the villain Fernand Montego, and he is just this slimy, smarmy aristocrat. Aside from backstabbing his best friend, he's a horrible husband to Mercedes, and he has such a punchable face and attitude that you can't help but wait for Jim Caviezel to just skewer him with a sword with all the skills that he learned in prison. But the real surprise for me in this movie, casting-wise, is the old man that takes Edmond under his wing when they're in prison together. And he's played by Richard Harris, and Richard Harris is such a great actor. I love him whenever he shows up in any movie. If he's a lead, if he's a side character, he always steals the show. He's always believable, and he's great here. He's a priest that got arrested. He's been here God knows how many years, and he teaches Edmond how to read and write and be a gentleman, but also how to, you know, fence, sword fight. So when he walks out, he's just an agent of vengeance. He has his purpose. He knows exactly what he's gonna do, and he's gonna get his life back. And when I was watching this movie, I couldn't help but think of how this movie was not just inspired by the book, The Count of Monte Cristo, and all the versions that have come before, which obviously this is definitely influenced by, but how much it seems to be inspired by The Mask of Zorro, which only came out 4 years prior. You know, the Antonio Banderas movie directed by Martin Campbell, and I love that movie so much. It's one of those movies that I can always put on and watch again and again and again and never get sick of. It's just so much fun. And The Count of Monte Cristo is the exact same way. It's a swashbuckling adventure. It's got great practical effects. It doesn't lean on CGI too much, even though this is 2002. We're really going into the digital age. There's a lot of practical sets and stunts and costumes and just everything tangible to make you feel like you are in 17th century France. It just feels so authentic and real. I love movies that can transport me to another place or time, whether that's a fantasy land or a historical drama. And really the historical dramas that hit the hardest seem to be the ones that lean more on the practical effects. There's just something that feels less real when you have a period drama and there's a bunch of CGI going around, because your brain picks up on that and you're brought back to the modern era and it's not quite as immersive. But this movie pulls that off in spades. It's fantastic, and like The Mask of Zorro, it never lets up. The pacing is great. You go from a very intense first act of the betrayal and you're just beginning to learn these characters, and then all of a sudden he's in jail, he's getting whipped, he's getting tutored, and he plans his escape, he escapes. So that all has great tension, great atmosphere in that prison. And then the movie proper kicks off in the second half when he adopts the moniker of Zatara as his new name, because the old Edmond is dead. He died in that prison. This is just a completely different character walking out. He picks up a sidekick who's one of these pirate smuggler guys that helped him get off that prison island. And he's a great character, super likable. I can't remember the actor's name or even the character's name, but he's Gomez Adams in Wednesday. He's been in a bunch of stuff. He's fantastic in this. He's the comic relief in one sense, but he's also kind of a moral center. He's a completely selfish pirate, so he's not that moral. But when Edmund is conflicted of whether or not he should exact revenge on Mercedes, or if he should forgive Mercedes and reunite their romance, he actually has a few good lines of encouragement to help him really straighten his head out, to not be so consumed by revenge that he loses sight of that light at the end of the tunnel. And remember when I said Richard Harris was the biggest casting surprise in this movie? Well, now that I think about it, that's actually not true. Henry Cavill as a teenage boy is the biggest surprise in this movie, because he's in here. Because this may very well be his first credit in a movie. This is well before Superman and the Immortals and any other thing that I've seen him in. He is so young here, but he's still very much Henry Cavill. It's like you took Superman's face and put him on a little teenage boy. And it's such a weird visual seeing him at that age, but he's also fantastic in here. He's the son of Mercedes and Fernand, and it turns out he's actually not his son. He's actually Edmund's son, and that's why Mercedes married him so fast, to keep it plausible that it could be Fernand's son, so that the baby will live and be raised in the best life possible. And it's that realization that kind of snaps Edmund out of that vengeful mindset, that he realized that, oh, he has a family, that he has something bigger than himself to take care of, to be responsible for. And this all comes ahead in the third act, after Edmund has pushed and manipulated Fernand into becoming more and more desperate, because he's really putting the squeeze economically, politically on him as the Count of Monte Cristo is more and more famous and people love him and people love giving him special privileges. He's using that power to just make his nemesis's life as uncomfortable as possible. And it is super satisfying to see, because Guy Pearce is just so unlikable. He's so smarmy and French, up his own butt about aristocracy and birthright, and you just love to see him get his comeuppance, which he does get. They finally throw down once Fernand has realized that he's lost everything. He's lost his wealth, he's lost his wife, he's lost his son, and then finally Edmund kills him and rides off into the sunset with his newfound family. And that's really where the movie leaves off. And I do respect it for that. It's not trying to moralize about how bad killing is and that you should never go after revenge when something is taken from you, but it does offer a nuanced take, which seems to be very true of most French literature, at least the stuff that I've read. French literature loves to take a premise like revenge or like love and just completely unpack it, look at it from all different sides, put people in situations that they're not ready for, and just see what becomes of that. And then it's really up to the reader to decide whether or not he did the right thing. Should he have let Fernand live? Did he deserve to die? And the message I take away from this movie is that it's not up to us to decide such things. As a Christian, I believe that vengeance is for God alone, but also when you see that there is a problem and you do nothing, to what degree are you complicit in that? And this movie brings up all these great points in one scene or another, but it doesn't try to preach to you. You walk away from this movie really thinking about, what should these characters have done? Did they make the right decisions? At what point did some of them go too far? That's really what great literature and great film should do. It should get the conversation started. And I'm really glad that I took a chance on this movie, because it's not a movie that most people talk about. I mean, Zorro has had some staying power in the public conversation ever since it came out, and its popularity has kind of ebbed and flowed over the years, but I haven't really seen or heard anybody talk about this movie, and it's a real shame, because It's phenomenal, and I think more people should watch it. But now I turn it over to you guys. What do you think about the Count of Monte Cristo? Whatever you think, let me know in the comments. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content, and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. As always, I'm Colby. This is my nerdy talk, and I'll see you in the next video.